For 10 years, my best friend talked me out of every relationship. Last night, I found out why. My best friend Carly and I met in middle school. She transferred in 7th grade and didn't know anyone, so I invited her to sit with me at lunch. From that day forward, we were inseparable. She was there for me through my parents' divorce, through my anxiety diagnosis, through every bad grade and every rejection letter. I trusted her more than anyone in my life. Throughout high school and college, I dated a few guys and none of them ever worked out. Looking back, I realized Carly always had something negative to say about every single one of them. My first boyfriend in sophomore year, she said, was too clingy and would hold me back. I broke up with him a month later. My college boyfriend, she said, was too focused on his career and would never prioritize me. I ended things after 6 months. Every guy I brought around, she would find a flaw and convince me I deserved better. I always thought she was just looking out for me. After college, I focused on my career and stayed single for a few years. Then 8 months ago, I met someone at a work conference. His name was Devin, and he was different from anyone I had ever dated. He was kind and attentive and made me feel like the only person in the room when we talked. We started dating and things moved fast. He met my family after 2 months and they loved him. I waited longer to introduce him to Carly because I knew she would find something wrong with him. When they finally met, she was polite but quiet. Afterward, she told me he seemed nice, but something felt off about him. She said she couldn't explain it, but her gut told her he wasn't the one. I ignored her for the first time ever. 3 months ago, Devin proposed and I said yes. Carly didn't congratulate me. She just asked if I was sure. I told her I had never been more sure of anything. She went quiet after that and we barely talked for weeks. Last night was my bachelorette party. Carly organized the whole thing, which surprised me since she had been so distant. We went to dinner and then back to my apartment with a few other friends. Everyone was drinking and having fun. Around midnight, most of the girls left and it was just me and Carly on the couch. She was drunk and started crying. I asked her what was wrong and she said she needed to tell me something she had been holding in for 10 years. I thought maybe she was sick or something bad had happened. I held her hand and told her she could tell me anything. She looked at me and said she had been in love with me since high school. I didn't understand what she meant at first. She kept talking. She said every guy I ever dated she sabotaged on purpose because she couldn't stand watching me be with someone else. She said she thought if she kept me single long enough I would eventually realize I had feelings for her too. She said Devin was the first one she couldn't talk me out of and it was killing her. I sat there frozen. 10 years of failed relationships flashed through my mind. Guys I genuinely liked that I let go, because my best friend convinced me they weren't good enough. She asked me if I had ever thought about her that way. I told her no. I told her I loved her, but only as a friend. She started sobbing harder and said she knew that, but she couldn't watch me marry him. She said if I went through with the wedding, she couldn't be in my life anymore. I asked her if she was giving me an ultimatum between her and my fiance. She said yes. I told her to leave. She begged me to think about it, but I walked to the door and opened it. She left without another word. I sat on my couch alone at 2 in the morning the night before I was supposed to finalize my wedding plans with the woman I thought would be my maid of honor. This morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls from Carly and a text from Devin. He said Carly showed up at his apartment last night and told him everything. He said we needed to talk. I haven't called him back yet. I'm sitting in my car outside his building, and I can see Carly's car parked 3 spots away from mine. I grab my keys and force myself out of the car before I can change my mind. The cold air hits my face as I walk across the parking lot, each step feeling heavier than the last. Carly's silver Honda sits there 3 spots away, and seeing it makes everything real in a way it wasn't when I was just sitting in my car staring at it. She's up there right now talking to Devin, probably crying and apologizing and trying to explain herself. My hands shake as I pull open the building door and head for the stairs because I can't stand still in an elevator right now. I climb to the 3rd floor and walk down the hallway to apartment 312, the same door I've walked through dozens of times before, but now it feels like I'm approaching something dangerous. I can hear voices inside muffled through the door. I knock 3 times and everything goes quiet. Footsteps approach and I hold my breath. The door opens and Carly is standing there with red swollen eyes and mascara streaked down her cheeks. She opens her mouth to say my name, but I push past her into the apartment without looking at her. Devin is sitting on the couch in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking like he hasn't slept at all. He stands up when he sees me and the expression on his face makes my stomach drop, because I've never seen him look at me like that before. It's not anger exactly, more like he's trying to figure out who I am. Carly is still standing by the door and I can feel her watching us. Devin clears his throat and looks at Carly. He tells her she needs to leave now. His voice is firm but not angry, just tired and done with this conversation. Carly looks at me desperately and asks if we can talk, just the 2 of us for a few minutes. I shake my head and tell her I have nothing to say to her right now. She starts crying harder and grabs her purse from the side table. She walks past me toward the door and I can smell her perfume, the same one she's worn since high school. The door closes behind her and Devin and I stand in his living room in horrible silence. I can hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen and someone walking around in the apartment above us. Devin sits back down on the couch and I stay standing because I don't know what else to do with my body. He looks up at me and asks if what Carly told him is true, if she really sabotaged all my previous relationships because she was in love with me. I nod and confirm it's true. my voice coming out quieter than I meant it to. I watch him process this information, his face going through several emotions I can't quite read. He rubs his eyes with both hands and then puts his head in his hands. I sit down on the other end of the couch, leaving space between us that feels like a canyon. I start explaining everything that happened at the bachelorette party, how Carly got drunk and started crying and then confessed everything she'd been hiding for 10 years. Devin listens without interrupting, but I can see him thinking hard about what this means for us. His jaw is tight and he keeps looking at his hands. When I finish talking, he's quiet for a long moment. Then he asks me if I ever had any feelings for Carly that way, and I tell him honestly that I never did. I explain that I loved her like a sister, that I trusted her completely, but I never once thought about her romantically. Devin nods slowly and leans back against the couch. He admits he always thought Carly seemed overly invested in our relationship, but assumed she was just being protective as my best friend. He says there were moments when Carly would make subtle comments about us moving too fast, or him not being right for me. I feel sick realizing he noticed things I was completely blind to. He tells me about a time 2 months ago when Carly texted him saying she was worried I was losing myself in our relationship. He thought it was sweet that she cared so much. Now he realizes she was trying to plant seeds of doubt. We sit there talking for what feels like hours, going through every interaction with Carly that suddenly makes sense in this horrible new context. Devin says he loves me and wants to marry me, but he needs time to process that our entire relationship happened because Carly finally couldn't manipulate me away from someone. I understand, but it hurts to hear him question if what we have is real. I tell him that what we have is real, that my feelings for him have nothing to do with Carly. But even as I say it, I'm wondering how much of my life has been shaped by her opinions. Devin suggests we postpone the wedding planning for a few weeks while we both process everything that's happened. I agree, even though part of me wants to prove that Carly didn't win by disrupting our plans. We decide I should stay at my sister Rowan's place for a few days to give us both space to think. Devin walks me to the door and hugs me, and I hold on to him tighter than I probably should. When I get back in my car, Carly's Honda is gone. I sit there for a minute looking at the empty parking spot before I start the engine and drive to Rowan's apartment across town. The whole drive I keep replaying conversations with Carly in my mind, seeing them differently now. I park outside Rowan's building and text her that I'm coming up. She opens the door before I can knock and I break down crying the moment I see her. She pulls me inside and sits me down on her couch and I tell her everything about Carly's confession and the ultimatum and Devin needing space. Rowan is mad on my behalf, pacing around her living room and saying things about Carly that I've never heard my sister say about anyone. She goes to the kitchen and starts making tea while I cry on her couch. When she comes back with 2 mugs, she sits down next to me and asks me to think back on specific relationships Carly talked me out of. As I list them, I start seeing patterns I never noticed before. Every guy had some flaw Carly would focus on until it seemed huge and impossible to overlook. My high school boyfriend was too clingy, my college boyfriend too focused on his career, the guy I dated after graduation too immature. Rowan points out that those are pretty normal things and asks why I let Carly convince me they were deal breakers. I don't have a good answer except that I trusted her judgment more than my own. Rowan suggests I look back at some of those relationships and actually think about whether Carly's reasons made sense. I pull out my phone and start scrolling through old photos, stopping on one from junior year of college. Justin is in the picture with his arm around me at some campus event. I remember how much I liked him, how easy things felt between us. Rowan asks what I'm looking at and I show her the photo. I tell her about Justin, how he was pre-med and really driven about his future. Carly kept telling me he was too focused on his career and would never make time for a real relationship. She said medical school would consume him and I'd always come second. I broke up with Justin after 3 months because I believed her. Rowan asks if I ever checked in with Justin after the breakup to see if Carly was right. The question hits me hard because I realize I never did. I just accepted Carly's version of events and moved on. I type Justin's name into social media and find his profile after a few seconds. His most recent photo shows him with a woman and a toddler at some park. The caption says something about family time being the best time. I click through more photos and see he got married 2 years ago. He looks happy. His wife is a teacher, and there are dozens of photos of them doing normal couple things, going on trips, celebrating holidays. I show Rowan the photos, and she points out that Justin clearly learned to balance his career and personal life just fine. The guy Carly said would never prioritize anyone over his ambitions is now posting about date nights and family dinners. I feel sick looking at the photos because I could have been part of that life if I hadn't listened to Carly. I wake up the next morning on Rowan's couch with my phone buzzing nonstop on the coffee table. My neck hurts from sleeping at a weird angle and my eyes feel swollen from crying. I grab my phone and see 17 missed calls from Carly, all from the past hour. There's also a long text message that fills my entire screen when I open it. I have to scroll to read the whole thing. Carly writes that she's sorry and she never meant to hurt me. She says she thought I would eventually see that we belonged together. She writes that every time she saw me with someone else, it felt like losing me all over again. She says she knows what she did was wrong, but she couldn't help her feelings. The message goes on and on with justifications and explanations. She ends by begging me to understand and asking if we can talk. I read it twice and then delete it without responding. I can't deal with her trying to make me see her side right now. Rowan comes out of her bedroom in pajamas and asks if I'm okay. I tell her about the calls and the message. She sits down next to me and asks if I want to block Carly's number. I say maybe, but not yet, because part of me isn't ready to completely cut her off, even though I'm furious. Rowan makes eggs and toast while I sit at her small kitchen table. She puts a plate in front of me and sits down with her own breakfast. We eat in silence for a minute before she brings up what we were talking about last night. She says she's been thinking about my pattern of letting Carly make decisions for me. I tell her I know I relied on Carly too much, but I thought she was just being a good friend. Rowan shakes her head and says it went beyond just relationships. She reminds me that when I was choosing my college major, I was torn between psychology and communications. I wanted psychology, but Carly said communications would give me more job options. Rowan points out that I ended up choosing communications partly because Carly kept pushing me toward it. I feel embarrassed because I remember those conversations now. Carly had strong opinions about everything from what classes I should take to what jobs I should apply for after graduation. I always thought she was helping me think things through, but now I see she was just steering me toward what she wanted. Rowan asks how many other decisions I made based on Carly's input instead of my own judgment. I don't have an answer because I'm starting to realize it was almost everything. My phone buzzes with a text from Devin asking if we can meet for coffee that afternoon. I text back immediately saying yes and asking what time. He suggests 2 o'clock at the coffee shop near his apartment. I agree and spend the next few hours trying to make myself look presentable. I shower and put on clean clothes and try to do something with my hair. Rowan offers to come with me for support, but I tell her I need to do this alone. I drive to the coffee shop and arrive 10 minutes early. Devin is already there sitting at a corner table. He looks terrible, like he hasn't slept much. There are dark circles under his eyes and his hair is messy. My chest hurts seeing him stressed because of my friendship drama. I sit down across from him and we both just look at each other for a second. He says he's been thinking about everything since yesterday, and he wants to understand the full scope of what Carly did. I nod and ask what he wants to know. He says he wants me to walk him through every relationship Carly sabotaged, and what reasons she gave me for ending them. I take a deep breath and start with my first boyfriend in high school. I tell Devin about each guy in order, explaining what Carly said was wrong with them. My sophomore year boyfriend was too clingy, according to Carly. My junior year boyfriend didn't have enough ambition. The guy I dated senior year was too focused on sports. Justin in college was too career-driven. The guy I dated after graduation was too immature. As I list them out loud, I hear how flimsy some of the arguments were. Devin listens carefully and then points out that the reasons Carly gave were often contradictory. Some guys were too attentive, others not attentive enough. Some were too ambitious, others not ambitious enough. He asks why I never noticed that Carly was basically finding fault with everyone regardless of their actual qualities. I tell him I don't know. I guess I just trusted her judgment more than my own. Devin leans back in his chair and rubs his face with both hands. He says it sounds like Carly wasn't evaluating these guys based on whether they were good for me. She was evaluating them based on whether they threatened her position in my life. I know he's right, but hearing it said out loud makes me feel stupid for not seeing it sooner. I tell Devin I'm questioning my own judgment now about everything. I say I don't know if I'm even capable of making good decisions about relationships if I let someone manipulate me for 10 years without noticing. Devin reaches across the table and takes my hand. He says Carly manipulated me for years, and I shouldn't blame myself for trusting someone I considered family. He says manipulation works because it comes from people we trust. I start crying right there in the coffee shop and a few people at nearby tables glance over. Devin hands me napkins and waits while I try to pull myself together. He says he's not questioning our relationship or my feelings for him. He says he just needed to understand what happened, so we could figure out how to move forward. I ask him if he still wants to marry me after all this mess. He squeezes my hand and says, "Of course he does." He says Carly's actions don't change how he feels about me, but we need to make sure we're building our relationship on a solid foundation going forward. Devin says he thinks I should talk to a therapist about processing this betrayal. I agree it's probably a good idea because I'm clearly not handling it well on my own. He offers to help me find someone and pulls out his phone to search for therapists in the area. I'm grateful he's being so supportive even though he's hurt too. We spend the next 20 minutes looking at different therapist profiles and reading reviews. Devin suggests someone who specializes in relationship issues and betrayal. We agree that I should start seeing someone as soon as possible. Devin says we should also keep talking every day while I'm staying at Rowan's, so we can work through this together. I tell him I want that too. He walks me to my car and hugs me for a long time before I drive away. I feel slightly better knowing he's still committed to us even after everything that happened. Back at Rowan's apartment, I sit on her couch with my laptop and start seriously researching therapists. I find one named Elodie Lombard, who has good reviews and specializes in friendship betrayal and relationship issues. Her profile says she has experience helping people process trust violations and rebuild their sense of self. That sounds exactly like what I need. I call her office and the receptionist says she has an opening in 3 days. I book the appointment and feel slightly better having a concrete step to take. Rowan comes home from running errands and I tell her about meeting Devin and booking the therapy appointment. She says she's proud of me for taking action instead of just wallowing. She orders pizza for dinner and we watch movies on her couch. I keep checking my phone for more messages from Carly, but there's nothing new. Part of me is relieved and part of me feels weird about the silence after 10 years of constant communication. The next morning, I'm still asleep on the couch when Rowan's intercom starts buzzing repeatedly. Rowan comes out of her bedroom looking annoyed and answers it. I hear Carly's voice through the speaker asking to come up. My whole body tenses. Rowan looks at me and I shake my head. She tells Carly firmly that I don't want to see her and she needs to leave. Carly's voice gets higher and she says she just wants to explain. I can hear her crying through the intercom. Rowan's voice gets harder and she says if Carly doesn't leave right now, she's going to call the police. There's silence for a few seconds and then Carly says please one more time. Rowan repeats that she'll call the police and then hangs up the intercom. We both stand there listening, but the buzzing doesn't start again. Rowan goes to her window and looks down at the street. She says Carly is walking back to her car. I sit down on the couch feeling shaky. After Carly leaves, I feel upset that she won't respect my need for space. Rowan sits next to me and says, Carly showing up like this is not okay. She suggests I might need to get a formal restraining order if Carly keeps showing up at places. That seems extreme, but I'm also starting to think it might be necessary. Rowan says she's serious about calling the police next time if Carly shows up again. I pull out my phone and text Devin to let him know what happened. He texts back right away offering to come over. I tell him I'm okay and just need some time to process. He says to call him if I change my mind. I spend the rest of the day feeling anxious every time I hear a noise outside, wondering if Carly is going to show up again. I spend the afternoon sitting on Rowan's couch scrolling through every photo on my phone. My thumbs move automatically through years of pictures while my brain processes what I'm seeing with new eyes. There's me and Carly at senior prom with my date Mark standing awkwardly to the side while Carly has her arm wrapped around my waist. There's us at my college graduation where Carly is pressed against me in the photo, and my boyfriend at the time is half cut out of the frame. I keep scrolling and the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. In almost every picture where I'm with a boyfriend, Carly has positioned herself between us or right next to me with her hand on my shoulder or arm. I zoom in on her face in a photo from my 22nd birthday party. I'm standing with the guy I was dating then and Carly is right behind us. Her smile looks tight and forced and her eyes aren't happy at all. I always thought she looked protective in these photos, like a concerned friend watching out for me. Now I see its possessiveness written all over her face. She didn't want to protect me from these guys. She wanted to protect her position as the most important person in my life. I feel sick looking at all this evidence that was right in front of me for years. I open social media and look through the photos Carly posted of us over the years. She tagged me in hundreds of pictures and most of them are just the two of us. The few that include my boyfriends have captions like, "Girls' night is the best night," or "Nothing beats time with your best friend." I remember thinking those captions were sweet. Now they feel like territorial markings. I find a photo from 3 years ago where I'm with a guy I dated briefly, and Carly commented, "He's lucky to have you, but he better treat you right." At the time, I thought she was being supportive. Now I wonder if she was already planning how to convince me he wasn't good enough. I close the apps and sit there staring at my blank phone screen. My hands are shaking. I text Devin asking if we can talk tonight, and he responds right away saying yes. Then I open my messages and scroll back through years of conversations with Carly. I search for Justin's name and find dozens of messages where Carly complained about him to me. "He's working late again. When does he ever make time for you?" And, "I saw him at the library with that girl from his study group. Seemed pretty friendly." And, "You deserve someone who puts you first." I remember believing every word. I search for other ex-boyfriends' names and find similar patterns. Carly constantly pointing out flaws and planting seeds of doubt. I want to throw my phone across the room, but instead I keep reading because I need to see the full scope of what she did. After an hour of this, I feel exhausted and angry and sad all at once. I open a new message and type Justin's name. We're still connected on social media even though we haven't talked in years. I write a short message apologizing for how I ended things and explaining that I'm realizing I didn't handle our breakup well. I tell him I'm sorry if I hurt him. I stare at the message for a full minute before hitting send. I don't expect him to respond, but I need to say it anyway. My phone buzzes less than an hour later. Justin wrote back saying he appreciated the message and he's glad I'm doing well. He says it's nice to hear from me and he's happy now, so I shouldn't worry about the past. I feel a wave of relief that he's not angry. I write back thanking him for being understanding. He responds asking what made me think about our relationship after all this time. I hesitate, but then decide to be honest. I tell him I recently found out my best friend was manipulating me during our relationship, and I'm trying to understand what really happened. He writes back immediately saying that's intense and asks if I want to talk about it. I wasn't expecting this conversation to go deeper, but I find myself saying yes. He sends his number and suggests we switch to a phone call if I'm comfortable. I call him and he answers on the second ring. We talk for almost an hour. Justin tells me he was really confused when I broke up with him because from his perspective, things were going great. He says I seemed happy and we were making plans together. And then suddenly I ended it saying he was too focused on his career. He admits he didn't understand where that came from because he thought he was balancing school and our relationship pretty well. I feel my stomach drop as he talks. Then he says something that makes me freeze. He tells me Carly pulled him aside at a party about a month before we broke up. She told him I was feeling smothered and needed more space. She said I was too nervous to tell him directly, but but I was feeling overwhelmed by how serious things were getting. Justin says he immediately started giving me more space and pulling back because he didn't want to lose me. He thought he was doing what I wanted. I sit there on Rowan's couch with my hand over my mouth. Carly didn't just talk to me about Justin. She talked to Justin about me. She actively interfered in our relationship from both sides. I tell Justin that conversation never happened. I never told Carly I felt smothered or needed space. He goes quiet on the other end of the line. I ask Justin if Carly said or did anything else, and there's a long pause before he answers. He tells me Carly would text him occasionally during our relationship. At first it seemed innocent, like she was just checking in as my best friend. But looking back, he realizes the messages were always suggesting problems that didn't exist. She would text him things like, "She seemed sad today. Is everything okay with you guys?" Or, "She mentioned you've been really busy with your internship. Must be hard to make time for her." Justin says he thought Carly was just looking out for me, but now he sees she was actively trying to create doubt and distance between us. I apologize again, and he stops me. He says we were young and he doesn't blame me for trusting my best friend. He says he's married now with a good life and he's genuinely okay. He hopes I can work through whatever happened with Carly. We say goodbye and I sit there holding my phone, feeling like the ground has shifted under me. Carly's manipulation was so much deeper than I realized. She wasn't just talking me out of relationships. She was sabotaging them from the inside. 3 days later, I'm sitting in a therapist's office for the first time in my life. The room is small and comfortable with soft lighting and a couch that's more supportive than Rowan's. Elodie sits across from me in a chair with a notepad, but she's not writing anything yet. She's just listening as I try to explain 10 years of friendship and betrayal in 50 minutes. I start with the bachelorette party and Carly's confession, but Elodie stops me and asks me to go back further. She wants to know how Carly and I met and what our friendship was like before the romantic relationship started. I tell her about 7th grade lunch and how Carly transferred in and didn't know anyone. I explain how I was invited her to sit with me, and we became inseparable. Elodie asks what was going on in my life when I met Carly. I tell her my parents had just separated and I was struggling with anxiety, even though I didn't have a diagnosis yet. Carly was the one stable thing in my life when everything else felt chaotic. Elodie nods and writes something down. She asks if I had other close friends at that time, and I realize I didn't. I had Carly, and that was enough. Elodie asks more questions about my family and my anxiety and how Carly supported me through difficult times. I start to see where she's going with this. Elodie suggests that Carly recognized my vulnerability during a really difficult period in my life. My parents were divorcing, and I was dealing with anxiety, and I desperately needed someone stable to hold on to. Carly positioned herself as that person. She became the one relationship I could count on when everything else was falling apart. Elodie explains that this gave Carly power over me. Not in a conscious, manipulative way at first, but as a natural result of being my primary support system. Then over the years, as I started dating people, those relationships threatened Carly's position as the most important person in my life. So she used the power she had built up to eliminate the threats. She convinced me that these guys weren't good enough, and I believed her because I had been trained to trust her judgment completely. Hearing it explained this way makes me feel angry and sad at the same time. I'm angry at Carly for taking advantage of a scared middle schooler who just needed a friend. But I'm also sad for that scared kid I was who was so desperate for stability that I gave someone else complete control over my life decisions. Elodie says both feelings are valid and I should let myself experience them. The session ends, and I schedule another appointment for next week. I sit in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I can drive away. Devin and I meet for dinner at a quiet restaurant neither of us has been to before. I wanted neutral territory where we wouldn't have memories attached to the space. He's already sitting at a table when I arrive, and he stands up to hug me. We order food and make small talk about work and Rowan and the weather. Then I tell him what I learned from Justin about Carly's direct interference. I explain how she talked to Justin behind my back and created problems that didn't exist. Devin listens carefully and doesn't interrupt. When I finish, he's quiet for a long moment. Then he admits Carly texted him several times early in our relationship. She would send him messages expressing concerns about us moving too fast or suggesting I might not be ready for something serious. Devin says he didn't think much of it at the time because he figured she was just being protective as my best friend. But now he sees it was part of her pattern. She was trying to create doubt in his mind the same way she did with Justin. I feel my chest get tight. Carly tried to sabotage us from the beginning, and I had no idea. Devin reaches across the table and takes my hand. He says he's glad he didn't listen to her concerns because what we have is real. But he also says we need to keep working through this together. I ask Devin if he's still questioning whether our relationship is real, or if it was just built on Carly's manipulation. He pulls his hand back and runs it through his hair. He says he's been thinking about this constantly since the night Carly showed up at his apartment. He says he believes what we have is genuine and not just a product of Carly's interference. But he's struggling with the fact that I let someone else have so much control over my life. He says he needs to know I can make my own decisions and trust my own judgment. Otherwise, he's worried I'll always be looking for someone else to tell me what to do. I understand his concern because I'm worried about the same thing. I tell him I'm working on it in therapy, and I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not letting other people make choices for me. He says he believes me, but this is going to take time for both of us. We finish dinner and he walks me to my car. We kiss goodbye and I drive back to Rowan's feeling both hopeful and scared about what comes next. Rowan is waiting up for me when I get home. She's sitting on the couch with tea and she made me a cup too. I tell her about dinner with Devin and his concerns about me trusting my own judgment. Rowan listens and then suggests I might want to talk to other people who knew me and Carly over the years. She mentions Mila, a mutual friend who's been around since college. Rowan thinks Mila might have observations about our friendship dynamic that could help me understand how others saw what I couldn't see myself. I'm nervous about involving more people in this mess, but I also need perspective. I pull out my phone and text Mila asking if we can meet for coffee. She responds within minutes saying yes and suggesting tomorrow afternoon. I agree and feel my anxiety spike immediately. I don't know what Mila is going to tell me, but I need to hear it. The next day, I arrive at the coffee shop early and order a drink I don't really want. Mila walks in right on time and her face is full of concern before she even sits down. She hugs me tight and asks how I'm doing. I give her a brief overview of what happened at the bachelorette party and Carly's confession. Mila's eyes get wide, but she doesn't seem completely shocked. I ask her if she ever noticed anything strange about how Carly acted around my boyfriends. Mila hesitates, and I can see her choosing her words carefully. She finally admits she always thought Carly was possessive of me. She says it wasn't obvious enough to say something about, but there were little things over the years that made her uncomfortable. I lean forward and ask her to tell me everything. Mila sets down her coffee cup and looks at me carefully before she starts talking. She tells me about a party sophomore year of college where I brought my boyfriend at the time, and Carly spent the whole night making group plans for the following weekend. Mila says Carly kept suggesting activities she knew my boyfriend wouldn't enjoy, and when he said he'd probably skip it, Carly acted like that was totally fine. Mila noticed Carly did this constantly, creating situations where my boyfriends would naturally exclude themselves, rather than Carly having to directly tell them they weren't welcome. She describes another time junior year when our friend group planned a beach trip, and Carly told everyone the house only had room for 6 people when it actually slept 8. My boyfriend at the time didn't get invited, and I just accepted Carly's explanation that we'd run out of space. Mila says she asked Carly about it later, and Carly got defensive, insisting she was just trying to give me quality time with my friends without boyfriend drama. I feel my face getting hot as I realize how many times this probably happened without me noticing. Mila mentions a Halloween party where Carly organized costumes for our whole friend group, but somehow forgot to include my date in the planning, making him feel awkward and left out all night. She says at the time she thought maybe Carly was just scatterbrained about including +1s, but looking back it seems way too consistent to be accidental. I ask Mila why she never said anything to me, and she admits she didn't want to cause problems in our friendship over what seemed like small things. She figured if it really bothered me, I would notice it myself and speak up. I understand her reasoning, but part of me wishes someone had pointed this out years ago. I stir my coffee even though I'm not drinking it and ask Mila if she thinks I'm doing the right thing by cutting Carly completely out of my life. Mila is quiet for a moment and I can see her thinking carefully about how to answer. She finally says she gets why I'm hurt and angry because what Carly did was manipulative and wrong. But she also says she thinks Carly really did believe she was in love with me, and probably convinced herself over the years that she was protecting me from guys who weren't good enough. Mila says that doesn't make it okay, but it might explain why Carly could justify her behavior to herself for so long. She mentions that Carly probably saw every guy I dated as a threat to our friendship, and to her secret hope that I would eventually return her feelings. I appreciate that Mila is trying to help me see Carly's perspective, but I'm not ready to feel sympathy for her yet. Mila reaches across the table and squeezes my hand, telling me she supports whatever decision I make about Carly. She says I need to do what's best for my own mental health and my relationship with Devin, and if that means keeping Carly out of my life, then that's completely valid. I thank Mila for being honest with me about what she observed over the years, and for not judging me for being so blind to it. We finish our coffee and hug goodbye in the parking lot, and she tells me to call her anytime I need to talk. That evening, Devin texts me asking if I want to come over for dinner. I drive to his apartment feeling nervous because we haven't spent much time together since I moved to Rowan's place. When he opens the door, I smell garlic and tomatoes and realize he's cooking pasta, which is my favorite meal. The apartment looks clean and there are candles on the dining table, which makes my chest feel tight with emotion. We sit down to eat and Devin asks about my day at work, and I tell him about a project I'm working on. He tells me about a meeting he had with a difficult client, and we laugh about something his coworker said. It feels so normal and easy, like we're just a regular couple having dinner together instead of 2 people trying to figure out if their relationship can survive a massive betrayal. After we finish eating, Devin clears the plates and then comes back to sit across from me. He reaches for my hand and tells me he's been thinking a lot about us and about the wedding. My heart starts pounding because I'm not sure what he's going to say next. He tells me he's ready to move forward with planning the wedding if I am. He says he knows we still have things to work through, but he loves me and he wants to marry me, and he doesn't want to let Carly's actions derail our future together. I feel relief wash over me, but then immediately feel scared because I don't trust my own judgment anymore. I tell Devin I'm glad he wants to continue with our plans, but I admit I'm worried that I can't make good decisions about my own life. I explain that for 10 years I let Carly control major choices, and now I don't know if I can trust myself to choose the right path forward. Devin listens carefully and then suggests we do premarital counseling together before the wedding. He says it would help us work through the foundation issues and make sure we're starting our marriage on solid ground instead of just hoping everything will be okay. I immediately agree because the idea of having professional guidance through this feels like exactly what we need. Devin pulls out his laptop and we start looking up counselors who specialize in couples work and premarital counseling. We make a list of 3 potential therapists to call tomorrow, and I feel hopeful for the first time in days. Devin walks me to my car later and kisses me goodnight, and I drive back to Rowan's apartment feeling like maybe we actually can get through this. The next morning, I'm at work when my phone rings with a number I don't recognize. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. A woman's voice says my name and asks if I have a few minutes to talk. I ask who this is, and she identifies herself as Bethany, Carly's younger sister. I'm surprised because Bethany and I have never been close, even though I've known her for years through Carly. She sounds nervous and asks if we can meet up because there's something she wants to tell me about Carly. I'm not sure I want to hear anything about Carly right now, but something in Bethany's voice makes me agree. We decide to meet at a quiet restaurant near my office during my lunch break. When I arrive, Bethany is already sitting in a corner booth looking anxious. She stands up and gives me an awkward hug before we both sit down. A server comes over and Bethany orders coffee with shaking hands. I order the same even though I've already had too much caffeine today. Bethany thanks me for agreeing to meet with her, and says she knows this is probably weird given that we've never really hung out one-on-one before. Bethany tells me she heard about what happened between me and Carly from their parents. She says Carly has been staying with them since the night of my bachelorette party, and she's been a complete mess. I don't know what to say to that, so I just wait for Bethany to continue. She takes a deep breath and says she feels like I deserve to know some background about Carly that might help me understand why she acted the way she did. Bethany explains that when Carly was in elementary school, she had an intense friendship with another girl named something I don't catch. They were inseparable for 2 years, and then the girl's family moved across the country suddenly without much warning. Bethany says Carly was completely devastated and cried every day for months. She became withdrawn and their parents were really worried about her. Bethany thinks that experience made Carly terrified of losing people she loves, which explains why she tried so hard to hold on to me by keeping other people away. She says Carly has always had trouble with the idea that people she cares about might choose someone else over her. I process this information and realize it does provide some context for Carly's behavior, but it also makes me sad that Carly never dealt with that childhood trauma in a healthy way. Bethany keeps talking and mentions another situation from when Carly was in high school. She had become really close with a girl on the soccer team and started acting possessive and jealous whenever the girl spent time with other friends. Eventually, the girl had to distance herself from Carly because the intensity was making her uncomfortable. Bethany says their parents tried to get Carly to see a therapist after that incident, but Carly refused, insisting nothing was wrong with her, and everyone else was the problem. I'm sitting there processing that this pattern of obsessive attachments existed long before I met Carly in middle school. I wonder if I was just the latest person Carly fixated on, or if there's something specific about our friendship that made her feelings more intense. Bethany tells me their parents have been pushing Carly to get professional help for years, but she's always resisted. I ask Bethany if she thinks Carly has some kind of attachment disorder, and Bethany says she's not qualified to diagnose anyone, but something is clearly not healthy about the way Carly relates to people she cares about. She mentions that Carly doesn't really have any close friends besides me, and hasn't had a serious romantic relationship with anyone. I realize I always thought Carly was just picky or focused on other things, but maybe she was so fixated on me that she couldn't form other meaningful connections. I thank Bethany for telling me all this, and she looks relieved that I'm not angry at her for reaching out. She asks me if I think I'll ever be able to forgive Carly, and I honestly tell her I don't know. I explain that what Carly did hurt me deeply and damaged my ability to trust my own judgment, and I need time and space to figure out what I want. Bethany nods and says she understands completely. She tells me she's not trying to make excuses for Carly or convince me to forgive her. She just wanted me to have the full picture of who Carly is and why she might have acted this way. I appreciate that Bethany respects my boundaries and isn't pushing me toward reconciliation. She writes her phone number on a napkin and slides it across the table, telling me I can call her anytime if I want to talk more about Carly's history, or if I just need someone to listen. We finish our coffee and I head back to work, feeling like I have a better understanding of Carly, but still no clarity about what I want to do with that information. A few days later, I have my regular therapy appointment with Elodie. I tell her about my conversation with Bethany and everything I learned about Carly's past. Elodie listens carefully and takes notes while I talk. When I finish, she asks me how this new information makes me feel about what Carly did to me. I admit it helps me understand where Carly's behavior came from, but it doesn't change the fact that she manipulated me for 10 years. Elodie nods and says that's exactly the right perspective to have. She explains that understanding someone's past trauma and psychological issues can provide context for their behavior, but it doesn't excuse the harm they caused. I'm allowed to be angry about the manipulation and betrayal, even if I understand that Carly was coming from a place of pain and fear. Elodie says a lot of people struggle with this because they think understanding someone's motivation means they have to forgive them, but those are actually two separate things. She tells me I can have compassion for what Carly went through as a child, while still maintaining firm boundaries to protect myself. I feel validated hearing this because part of me was worried I was being too harsh by cutting Carly out completely. Elodie assures me that prioritizing my own mental health and my relationship with Devin is not only reasonable, but necessary. She asks me if knowing about Carly's attachment issues changes anything about how I want to move forward, and I tell her it doesn't. I still need space from Carly to heal and figure out who I am without her influence. Devin and I have our first premarital counseling session with a therapist named Aiden Palmer, who came highly recommended. We sit together on a couch in Aiden's office while he sits across from us in a chair. He asks us to explain why we're seeking counseling, and Devin and I take turns describing the situation with Carly. Aiden listens without interrupting, and I can see him processing everything we're telling him. When we finish, he asks some clarifying questions about our relationship timeline and how we met. Then he asks us both what we need from each other to move forward in a healthy way. Devin speaks first and says he needs me to demonstrate that I can make my own decisions without constantly looking for external validation. He explains that he's worried I'll always be looking for someone else to tell me what to do if I don't learn to trust my own judgment. I understand his concern because it's the same thing I'm worried about. When it's my turn, I tell Aiden and Devin that I need patience while I learn to trust myself again. I explain that I've spent 10 years deferring to Carly's opinion on major life decisions, and it's going to take time for me to develop confidence in my own choices. Aiden writes some notes and then tells us both that these are very reasonable needs, and we can absolutely work on them together. He suggests we meet weekly for the next few months leading up to the wedding to build a strong foundation for our marriage. Devin reaches over and takes my hand, and I feel hopeful that we're taking the right steps to protect our relationship. Aiden hands us a worksheet before we leave and explains the homework assignment. We're supposed to make 3 decisions on our own this week, without asking each other's opinion first, then come together and talk about what we decided and why. The decisions can be small things like what to make for dinner, or bigger things like how to handle a work situation, but the point is, we each have to trust our own judgment before bringing the other person into it. I fold the paper and put it in my purse, feeling nervous about the whole thing. Devin squeezes my hand in the parking lot and tells me he knows this feels weird, but he believes I can do it. I want to believe him, but part of me still feels like I don't know how to make decisions without someone else's input validating them first. That night, I sit on Rowan's couch with my phone in my hands, staring at the long list of unread messages from Carly. There are texts and voicemails and even a few emails, all of them begging me to talk to her or at least let her explain. I've been ignoring all of them, but Elodie said in our last session that I need to set a clear boundary instead of just going silent. I open a new message and type carefully, reading it over 3 times before I send it. I tell Carly I need her to stop contacting me while I process everything that happened. I explain that her confession and the ultimatum she gave me destroyed 10 years of trust, and I can't just pretend none of it happened. My finger hovers over the send button for a full minute before I finally press it. Within 30 seconds, my phone buzzes with her response. She's begging for a chance to explain in person, saying there's so much I don't understand about why she did what she did. I read the message once and then put my phone face down on the coffee table without responding. Rowan comes home from work the next day and finds me scrolling through apartment listings on my laptop. She sits down next to me and asks what I'm doing, and I tell her I think it's time for me to get my own place. I've been staying with her for over a week now, and while she's been amazing about it, I can't live on her couch forever. Rowan looks at the screen and asks if Devin and I talked about me moving back in with him. I admit we discussed it, but we both agreed I need my own space right now while we work through things in counseling. Rowan nods and pulls the laptop closer, clicking through listings with me. We find a small studio apartment that's available immediately, and the rent is reasonable. I call the landlord right there and schedule a viewing for the next morning. Devin texts me later asking how my day was, and I tell him about the apartment. He asks if I'm sure about living alone, and I say, I think I need to do this. He responds that he understands and offers to help me move when the time comes. The studio apartment is tiny, but it has big windows and hardwood floors that make it feel less cramped. The landlord shows me around and I sign the lease that same day, my hand shaking slightly as I write my name. Moving day comes faster than I expected, and Devin shows up with his truck to help me pack my stuff from our shared apartment. Walking back into the place we live together feels strange and sad. My clothes are still in the closet and my books are still on the shelf, and it looks like I just stepped out for the day instead of leaving for over a week. Devin and I work quietly, boxing up my things and loading them into the truck. When we're almost done, he sits on the edge of the bed and I can see he's trying not to cry. I sit next to him and he takes my hand, reminding me that this is temporary while we work on ourselves and our relationship. He says it's not a breakup, and I nod, even though part of me is terrified it might turn into one. My first night alone in the studio apartment, I can't sleep. Every sound seems too loud and the space feels empty in a way that makes my chest tight. I've never lived completely alone before. In college, I had roommates. Then I moved in with Devin, and before that, I lived at home with my parents. Even during my parents' divorce, I had my mom or my dad around, depending on which house I was staying at. Now it's just me in this small room with my boxes still unpacked against the walls. I get up and make tea at 2 in the morning, sitting on the floor because I haven't bought any furniture yet besides a bed. The quiet is overwhelming, but also kind of peaceful in a way I didn't expect. Nobody is here to tell me what to do or what to think, or whether I'm making the right choices. It's just me. In my next therapy session with Elodie, I talk about how I've realized I've never really been on my own. I've always had either Carly's influence or a boyfriend, or my family making decisions with me or for me. Elodie asks how it feels to be alone now, and I tell her it's scary, but also exciting. She leans forward and says this time, alone might be exactly what I need to figure out who I am when I'm not defining myself through relationships. The idea makes my stomach flip because I'm not sure I know who that person is. Elodie gives me homework too, separate from what Aiden assigned. She wants me to spend time each day doing something just for myself without thinking about what anyone else would want me to do. I agree to try even though I have no idea where to start. I start making small decisions on my own without asking anyone's opinion. Tuesday night, I stand in front of my open fridge trying to decide what to make for dinner, and I realize my first instinct is to text Devin or call Rowan to ask what they think I should eat. Instead, I close my eyes and think about what I actually want. I end up making pasta with butter and garlic because it sounds good to me, not because anyone else suggested it. Wednesday, I pick a movie to watch without scrolling through options for 30 minutes waiting for someone to tell me what's good. Thursday, I buy a small plant for my apartment and choose the one I like instead of worrying if it's the right choice. These tiny decisions feel significant because I'm not second-guessing myself or reaching for my phone to ask Carly what she thinks. When Devin and I talk on Friday, he tells me I seem different, more sure of myself. I ask him what he means, and he says I'm not asking for his validation on every little thing anymore. The observation makes me feel proud and sad at the same time. Saturday morning, I wake up to an email from Carly with the subject line, "Please read this." I almost delete it without opening, but something makes me click on it. The email is long, probably 2,000 words, detailing everything she claims she did to protect me over the years. She writes about how she saw me getting hurt by guys who didn't deserve me, and she couldn't stand by and watch it happen. She lists specific examples of times she talked me out of relationships, and explains her reasoning for each one. She says she knows I'm angry, but she needs me to see her perspective and understand she was trying to keep me safe. I read the whole thing once and then delete it from my inbox. Her justifications don't change what she did. She still manipulated me for 10 years and sabotaged relationships because she wanted me for herself, not because she was actually protecting me. In my next session, Elodie asks if I responded to the email, and I say no. She tells me Carly may never fully accept responsibility for the manipulation, and I need to make peace with that fact. Some people can't admit when they've hurt others because it would mean facing something too painful about themselves. My phone buzzes with a text from Bethany while I'm grocery shopping. She says Carly finally started seeing a therapist to work on her attachment issues, and she thought I should know. I stand in the produce section reading the message 3 times. Part of me is glad Carly is getting help, but I also know that doesn't mean I have to forgive her or let her back into my life. I text Bethany back thanking her for the update and saying I hope therapy helps Carly build healthier relationships in the future. Bethany responds asking if I think I'll ever be able to be friends with Carly again, and I tell her honestly that I don't know. Right now, Bethany says she understands and tells me to take care of myself. Devin texts me on Thursday asking if I'm free Saturday night, and when I say yes, he tells me to dress nice. Saturday evening, he picks me up from my apartment and drives us to the restaurant where he proposed 3 months ago. We sit at the same table by the window and order wine, and I realize this is the first time we've been back here since that night. Devin reaches across the table and takes my hand, saying he wanted to celebrate our 3-month engagement anniversary. We talk about how different our relationship feels now compared to before Carly's confession. I admit that even though everything that happened was painful and hard, I think we're actually stronger now. Devin agrees and says the crisis forced us to examine our foundation and rebuild it in a way that's more solid. We spend 2 hours at dinner just talking and laughing, and I feel more connected to him than I have in weeks. Our next premarital counseling session with Aiden starts with him asking if we're ready to set a new wedding date since we postponed all the planning. Devin looks at me and I realize I don't feel the anxious knot in my stomach that I would have felt a month ago. I tell Aiden I'm ready, and Devin smiles, saying he's been ready all along. Aiden asks us what changed, and I explain that I feel more confident in my own judgment now, and I'm not looking for someone else to validate my decisions. Devin adds that he sees me making choices independently, and trusting myself in ways I didn't before. Aiden writes some notes and tells us this is exactly the kind of growth he was hoping to see. He asks us to think about a date that feels right to both of us, and we can finalize it in our next session. Devin and I pick up my phone and schedule my final appointment with Elodie for 2 weeks from now, right before the wedding. The time between now and then passes quickly as I keep working on myself and spending time with Devin. When the day arrives, I walk into her office feeling different from I did that first session months ago. Elodie smiles when she sees me and comments that I look more relaxed. We sit down and she asks me to reflect on where I started versus where I am now. I tell her that when I first came in, I couldn't make any decision without second-guessing myself or wanting someone else's approval. Now I choose things on my own and trust that I know what's right for me. She asks about my boundaries with Carly, and I explain that I've stuck to my decision about not having contact. It was hard at first, but now I feel confident that I made the right choice for my own well-being. Elodie nods and says that's real growth, being able to put my own needs first, even when it feels uncomfortable. We talk about my excitement for the wedding, and she asks if I have any doubts about marrying Devin. I tell her honestly that I don't, that I'm excited to marry him because I love him, and we've built something real together. She points out that this is completely different from how I talked about relationships before, when I was always looking for external validation. Now I'm making this choice from a place of confidence and self-awareness. Elodie tells me she's proud of the work I've done over these months, and I should be proud too. For the first time, I actually believe her instead of brushing off the compliment. I thank her for helping me learn to trust myself, and she says I did the hard work. She just guided me through it. We shake hands, and I leave her office knowing this is probably the last time I'll see her. The thought doesn't scare me because I feel ready to move forward on my own. The week before the wedding, everything becomes busy with last-minute preparations and people arriving from out of town. Devin's parents fly in 3 days early, and we meet them for dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. His mom hugs me tight and tells me how happy she is that Devin found someone who loves him so much. I realize they never doubted our relationship even when things got difficult with the Carly situation. They supported us through it without judgment or pressure. Devin's dad asks about the final details and seems genuinely interested in hearing about the flowers and music we picked. After dinner, his mom pulls me aside and says she can see how good Devin and I are together, that we bring out the best in each other. Her words mean a lot because I know she's not just being polite. My own parents arrive the next day, and even though they've been divorced for years, they're both kind and supportive. My mom helps me pick up my dress from the final alterations, and my dad takes Devin out for drinks to get to know him better. At the rehearsal dinner, both my parents sit at the same table and chat pleasantly with Devin's family. I catch Rowan's eye across the room and she gives me a thumbs up, clearly impressed that our parents are behaving so well. The dinner goes smoothly with toasts and laughter, and I feel surrounded by people who genuinely care about both of us. Devin squeezes my hand under the table, and I know he's feeling the same thing. His best friend gives a funny speech about how Devin talked about me constantly after we first met. My mom gets a little teary during her toast, but keeps it together. When the evening ends, I hug my parents and Devin's parents and feel grateful that we have this support system starting our marriage. On my wedding day, I wake up in my studio apartment at 6 in the morning feeling surprisingly calm. I make coffee and sit by the window watching the sun come up over the buildings. In a few hours, I'll be getting married, and instead of feeling nervous, I just feel certain. Rowan arrives at 8 with breakfast and her makeup kit. She sets everything up on my bathroom counter and tells me to eat something before we start getting ready. While I'm eating, she says she's proud of how I handled everything with Carly, and how much I've grown over the past few months. I tell her I couldn't have done it without her letting me stay with her and being there when I needed to talk. She waves off my thanks, but I can tell she's pleased. We start the process of hair and makeup, and Rowan keeps me entertained with stories about her own wedding years ago. Around 11, my mom arrives to help me into my dress. The three of us work together to get all the buttons fastened and the veil positioned correctly. When I look in the mirror, I barely recognize myself. My mom starts crying, and Rowan hands her a tissue while rolling her eyes affectionately. I think about the night of the bachelorette party when I sat alone on my couch feeling betrayed and confused. That version of me feels like a different person now. I'm not the same woman who let Carly make decisions for her, or who doubted her own judgment constantly. I've learned to trust myself and set boundaries and choose what I want, instead of what someone else thinks I should want. My mom asks if I'm ready, and I nod, picking up my bouquet. We head downstairs where a car is waiting to take us to the venue. The ceremony takes place in a garden venue with white chairs set up in rows and flowers everywhere. I stand at the back with my dad and watch the guests take their seats. Devin's family fills the right side and mine fills the left. I see Mila sitting near the front and she waves when she catches my eye. The music starts and my bridesmaids walk down the aisle one by one. Rowan goes last as my maid of honor and takes her place at the front. Then it's my turn and my dad offers me his arm. We walk slowly down the aisle and I see Devin waiting at the altar in his suit looking nervous and happy. When we reach the front, my dad kisses my cheek and places my hand in Devin's. The officiant begins speaking, but I'm focused on Devin's face and the way he's looking at me like I'm the only person in the world. We exchange our vows and I mean every word I say about loving him and choosing him and building a life together. When Devin says his vows, his voice cracks with emotion, and I have to blink back tears. The officiant pronounces us married, and Devin kisses me while everyone claps. We walk back down the aisle together as husband and wife, and I feel genuinely happy and confident about our future. This choice was completely mine, made with clear eyes and a strong sense of who I am. Our relationship survived a major crisis, and came out stronger because we were honest with each other and willing to do the work. As we step outside into the sunlight, Devin spins me around and laughs, and I know that whatever comes next, we'll face it together as partners who respect and trust each other completely.